So the mountain Pickering and the Elder are from is called Ichigo-yama, or Strawberry Mountain. God, that's generic. You know what, screw it. I'm just gonna keep calling it Mount Bukake, lest we forget one of the greatest meme-worthy explosions in all of anime. So finally, we get at least a little bit of world building like I was asking for in my first impressions video. Admittedly, it wasn't nearly quite as much as I would have wanted, but let's go through this episode anyway. The episode opens with the girls trying to make donuts, which just so happened to be Pecorine's favorite treat, and end up botching them up royally. Maybe next time you should try throwing in some cannabis. After all, according to Yakitachi Japan, a little weed will send you traveling through time. Yeah, I need to start watching different anime, don't I? Anyway, the donut making causes the Elder to reminisce about life at Mount Bukake. As it turns out, he was training a group of fairies, including Pecorine, in the art of producing Kirakira so that they could emulate the legendary Precure Precure, and even eventually use the portable bakery the Precure were currently standing in as their home base. So wait, does that mean that the fairies were trained to become Precure themselves? I mean, that's certainly not unheard of, especially considering we just came off a season where a humanized fairy became one. So, are they going to do it again this season? Guess time will tell. Anyway, it was at this point in the story that the Kirakira thieves decided to stop by and have a little battle with the Elder that led to Mount Bukake releasing its load, as we already saw in episode 1. The resulting explosion leaving the fate of many of Pecorine's friends in question. Pecorine, understandably, doesn't take being reminded of possibly losing some of her friends for good all that well, and the rest of the episode is Izuka trying to console her friend into overcoming her grief. She does this by convincing her to help make a new batch of donuts, and I'll admit, in spite of this being pretty cheesy, I do kind of like this scene. It's a nice moment where we get to see more of Ichika's natural ability as a leader, as she's able to make Pecorine feel like she's an invaluable member of the team. After making a successful batch of rather huge, almost Texas-sized donuts, they decorate them by putting Pecorine and her friends' faces on all of them. Ah, isn't that nice? This anime is essentially promoting cannibalism! Though before they can brew up some coffee to go with their disturbing little treats, Pecorine decides they need to take their little fried dough rings up to her old destroyed training grounds. There, the Kirakira within them seems to produce an illusion that flashes back to the days before the thieves attacked the grounds, back when Pecorine was able to just enjoy those carefree days with her friends. Wouldn't it be nice if the same thing were to happen with one of Karutan's old donuts? Then we could remember the good old days with the original donut man. After the reminiscing was done, Pecorine decided to start eating her donut self, only to be interrupted by this week's monster. This time, surprisingly, it has an obvious motif based on a monkey.
You've got the pride of a human being, but the brain of a monkey, you monkey head!
Maybe they actually took my advice and hired a new monster designer. Anyway, wanting to protect Pecorine and her very personal donut, Izuka transforms trying to take on the big chimp, only to be knocked back and into the arms of... Seriously, I don't even have to say anything at this point. The show's creators are keeping this ship alive. With the team assembled, they use some fairly well orchestrated teamwork that leads into Izuka using her usual attack to just finish off the monster rather abruptly. Okay, seriously, that masked person cannot arrive sooner. These guys make modern Power Rangers baddies look competent by comparison. With the day one, the episode ends with Izuka coming up with a new idea to track down Pecorine's fairy friends, turning the bakery into an actual shop, and hoping they'll come in as customers. Yeah, normally I'd say that's a little far-fetched, but considering that their senior Precure are going to become their future customers, stranger things can happen, I guess. Though, before we reach that point, it looks like they're going to run into some trouble actually opening their little shop. Yeah, I hear health inspectors these days are pretty strict. You know what, trick is you just have to pretend that mold is just part of the decor. Anyway, this episode was passable. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think this episode had good moments, most of them involving Pecorine. I didn't really bring her up in my first impressions video, mostly because she hadn't really done anything noteworthy since the first episode, but this episode was able to flesh her out a lot more, thankfully. She seems to suffer from survivor's guilt over not knowing what happened to her friends. Considering the Elder's condition, it's not unfair to assume the worst. As a result, she does now have a higher stake in helping the Precure overcome the thieves, who at this point are laughably underwhelming villains, but at least the tragedy of her situation is still fairly well told. Again, here's hoping we actually learn something about the baddies next week. Other than that, this episode did seem to plant some early seeds to possibly interesting developments, like the fact that there are fairies in other countries training in producing Kirakira. Still, until we do get those actual payoffs, this episode by itself is nothing bad, but also nothing great. Also, again, parts of the opening and ending were replaced with clips from Dreamstars this week. I kind of miss seeing our heroines jump to the beat of the music in the opening, but at least these are intriguing previews. The thing that stood out the most for me, aside from this face from Ichika, was the fact that the villain of the film seemed to do the too sweet hand gesture at one point. Well, considering the themes of this show, I guess it's appropriate. Anyway, the Super Robot Wars V review is almost done, and I should have it up in a few days. So until then though, farewell for now my friends, and stay sweet.